The bearing is assembled between the balancer shaft and the eccentric counterweight. It allows the pad to rotate while sanding. Eventually, the bearing will wear out and fail. When this happens, the pad won't spin or will be very stiff, and the sander will become difficult to control. Replacing the bearing is a repair that you can do yourself, and I'm going to show you how. I'll begin by removing the pad from the sander. You'll need a thin wrench to remove the pad, and the sander actually came with one. Insert the wrench between the pad and the shroud until it makes contact with the nut, and then you can unscrew the pad. Next, I'll remove the dust shroud. Now I'll remove the motor assembly from the housing. It's held in place with a cast ring. You'll notice that there's notches in the ring. You can put a screwdriver on one of those notches and then hit the screwdriver with a mallet to remove the ring. The balancer shaft and bearing are held in place with a retaining ring, and I'll use a small pick to remove it. With the retaining ring removed, now I can remove the balancer shaft and bearing from the eccentric. I'll clamp the eccentric into a vise and use a couple of large screwdrivers to pry the bearing from the eccentric. Now I'll use an arbor press to press the balancer shaft from the bearing. I'll insert the balancer shaft into a bearing separator. You'll notice that there's a rubber boot, and you'll want to make sure that the separator is between the boot and the bearing. I'll place this into the arbor press. And I'll use a socket that has a diameter that's just slightly smaller than the balancer shaft. And now I can go ahead and press it out. Now I can install the new bearing. I'll place the rubber boot back onto the shaft. The side with the flexible flange should be down. And then the bearing on top. You'll notice one side of the bearing has a shield and the other side does not. The shield should go against the boot. And now I can press the bearing into place. Now I can install the balancer shaft and bearing assembly back into the eccentric. And secure it with the retaining ring. As I install the motor into the housing, you'll notice at the bottom of the housing there's a small groove. That groove is for this pin on the motor. You also notice there's a little indicator mark. If I line up the pin with the indicator mark, it'll slide right into the groove at the bottom. I'll place the locking collar over the counterweight, align the pin with the indicator, and slide it into the housing. Now I'll just screw the locking collar back in place. I'll finish up by reinstalling the dust shield and the pad. As you install the pad, make sure you get the fiber discs between the pad and the balancer shaft. The discs are there so that the pad doesn't get stuck to the balancer shaft. And that's all it takes to install a new bearing on your pneumatic sander.